Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome editor Stephen Perkins, who joins us for our first of two episodes covering Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget. Stephen will talk us through his experience in the film and what it took to edit it. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Stephen. Hi, Steve. Thank you for joining me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad we can have you on to talk about Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget, which is now streaming on Netflix. It's kind of weird to say that there's a second Chicken Run, considering the first one came out so many years ago, which I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that it came out. And then when people start throwing numbers out saying it's 25 years or 20 plus years, you think, no, I swear it was only, 5 years ago that it came out.
I know I have that conversation with many people. It's funny. It's such an iconic film, and like I say, certainly from people of our generation, my generation. I'm in my 40s. It was definitely one of the ones that came out when we were in our prime of going to the movies and enjoying these films.
It feels really just perfect time to sort of get it reintroduced as well into the world, because it's probably been enough time for people who were kids at the time or teenagers watching it to now watching the sequel with their kids. And I guess that also kind of plays into the story as well, how the first one is a big play on sort of the Great Escape, and then the second one is a very more focused on that mother-daughter aspect of the film.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good place to start would be, how did the project come about for you, and why did you want to take it on?
It's a big question. I don't know where to start with that one. Animation is very much in my blood. My father was a 2D animator. I grew up helping out, shooting line tests for him, running parcels of animation up to London. It's something that's very, very close to my heart. That's why I love returning to these animated films. And I got the call to come work on Chicken Run with Aardman. And it's they're such an iconic British animation studio. It's kind of something you dream of doing. You just can't really say no. So yeah, it's a real honor to be asked, and I jumped at the opportunity.
I guess as well, like, because they don't make as many films that often, it always feels quite special when Aardman come out with a new one, especially when they have iconic characters like Wallace and Gromit. And then now with Chicken Run as well with a sequel. Yeah, it's just too good to turn down, right? It's just so like, well, I can't say no, because this is what a crazy and amazing opportunity.
Yeah, iconic characters from an iconic studio.
Yeah, exactly. Before we jump into the project as well, I'm just curious, because you're talking about animation and it being in your blood. With your dad being so heavily involved and seeing the process firsthand, does that make you appreciate like the work that people do more, knowing like how much hard work it is to create an animation film compared to a live action film?
I mean, absolutely. It's the craft that it makes the magic. The specifically with Aardman, it's the handcrafted, hand manipulated characters. You even see thumbprints on some of the plasticine that we leave in the film. It's very, very much a human crafted labor of love.
Is that as well, the fact that there's still thumbprints in the plasticine? Is that how much care that needs to go into it compared to a live action where you have an actor who should be standing on his mark or or her mark or their mark, and then you have with sort of Chicken Run, for example, just how they painstakingly have to move everything for the scene to flow. Stop motion animation as well, which has always been something that blows my mind quite a lot. That there's like that it's still happening now, considering how much tech there is around that people can use, but that sort of craft is still there, that people are using it, even in this sort of time.
Right, I think you feel it. I think you like you say, you can see it on the characters, but you sense it in everything in the world that we create. And then it's very much a human created world in what is becoming increasingly a tech-driven world these days. So it's a nice kickback or callback to giving it an added reality almost. An added tactileness to the stories.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of look that as an audience member, you kind of know that you're watching something a little bit more special, something a little bit more, that it's like a lot more time and effort has been spent into certain scenes and setups, and even the way that the characters move and how they talk, and even when you build like the sound design around it, and even the way the actors are saying the lines as well, is another big thing where you think like, I wonder how some of this is made, which we'll find out shortly. But it's just like, wow, this is really cool. And like Wallace and Gromit played a massive part in my life as well. I think at one point when they had the free shorts on TV, I remember recording them all in a row and then breaking off the little tab that no one can ever record over the VHS tape. So it's always like stuff like that is it's like that's how like special I always thought of Aardman and the animation studio, just how important their work has been in my life and what I like to watch as well. But going back to Chicken Run and the editing process, how do you go about editing a stop motion film? With stop motion, there's only so much you can film each day because of the movement of the characters, the resetting of the scenes, and there's a lot of moving pieces as well. And then also puppets are involved in the animation. And I guess there's probably a small amount of footage to work on each day. Is it a case that you join later on in the shoot, or are you there from day one, slowly working away on what's been filmed?
With animation, I mean, it's a massively time-consuming process. I mean, I started on Chicken Run back in 2019. We spent a year and a half getting a first draft of the film together, if you like, before we even start filming anything. We need to know, we need to have a really great blueprint down of what the film's going to be and how the story's going to work and how our film's going to play out before we even start animating. So, I mean, as an example, I think an animator will probably animate anything around 6 seconds a week. So it's a slow burn even once we start shooting. So we need to know, we need to have a really good blueprint of what the film's going to be before we start that process, so that we don't get any wastage. We can't afford at that time to be shooting 6 seconds of animation and then scrapping it and asking them to do something else. So the edit starts very early on. We'll get the try and get a version of the script up, as quick as we can, sequence by sequence. Some directors will want to they have confidence in the script. They'll really micro-analyze each sequence, make sure that's working before they move on to the next, or we're trying to do pretty broad strokes just to get the whole film up and see how it's working. There'll be we don't tend to record with the voice actors that we'll use for the final film, because again, we'll do a lot of exploration early on before we even getting to that point. So we'll be you could do multiple versions of a sequence before you get that right. So we'll be using members of our crew to do what we call a scratch record. We'll be doing the sound design, everything in-house, temp music, everything we can to get past the film together before even starting any animation.
Well, I think it's quite amazing to hear that 6 seconds of footage is recorded. That's just mind blowing.
We generally shoot 24 frames a second. Aardman, the animators, will shoot on twos, so we're talking 12 poses for each character for every second of animation.
Wow, that is a lot. And because you think like as a normal film, it's a 24 frame. So if somebody's walking, it's so easy for it just to catch it and whatnot. But if you're doing a pose for every 2 frames, which probably now has probably made it a lot easier with digital rather than if you're shooting on film, because it must be miles upon miles of film reels that's used and film stock for that sort of stuff as well.
It's mind blowing to think the original Chicken Run was shot on film. I believe. I think I'm pretty sure it was, and even just like now, we can the animator can finish a pass on a shot, hit complete on their we use software called Dragon to shoot the shots, and that'll be up in editorial within like half an hour, and we can be reviewing it with the directors and making sure it's going to work. Whereas before, you're probably sending film off to a film lab and then getting that back the next day. So an already very slow process must have taken an age.
Yeah, and to think that like you're just going through those footage and just being like, imagine those after a few days being like, it's not 100% there, but we can just change around here whilst if they're there when the first whatever after a few hours of going from stage to screen in the edit booth as well. Probably helps quite a lot just to go through it all. But also when you go back to the beginning where you guys are building it up in with the storyboards, the scratch deck?
We call it scratch dialogue. So
scratch dialogue. Thank you. Sorry.
We'd be using like I said, we're probably recording lines ourselves, members of the crew, trying to find some good actors if we're lucky. I mean, if time and budget allows it's really useful to reach out to local acting talent actors around to do a pass. But like I said, we're starting to piece the film together before we may even know who our final cast is going to be. So we need to get this get something up and know it's working before many big decisions can be made, if you like.
Yeah, and I guess as well, as you said, it's so time consuming that you need to basically make the film before you actually make the final film, the final cut of it, which is also probably like such a big undertaking, because whilst on a live action film you could kind of find where your story is going by being on set and being sort of very more you can improvise a bit more in terms of actually we can change the camera over there rather than here.
I mean, or even you rehearsing with your actors before you even start shooting anything. I mean, we don't have those luxuries. We've got to find all that ourselves, if you like, before you even start getting your acting crew in.
That's probably another big thing as well, because what do you think is more pressurized for you as an editor? Do you think it's creating the first sort of draft of what the film will be, or is it actually working on what they're creating? What would be the final film?
That's an interesting question. The most pressure is probably initially starting, because you literally almost have like a blank canvas. So anything is possible. So you start piecing it together with sometimes even just a radio play. We may not even have any images to work with. You'll be putting a cut together with just a voice and sound effects and music, and trying to really sell the story with the simplest of tools. And then, like I said, we'll have the story team. They may initially beatboard out the whole film, so you'll have a single panel per setup. Initially, that doesn't usually get turned over to edit. It's a bit too rudimentary to start really working with. But your first passes on many scenes are very, very sketchy. They're very much roughed out. First pass can feel a little rough and ready. Certainly to look at. We're trying to screen something to sell the idea of what the film's going to be. With sometimes, I mean, obviously it's not, we have very talented people working on films, but you have like essentially sketches of a stick man almost in some instances, just roughing things out, really placing it in, and then best efforts at doing the voices that we can from our crew and the sound pass, and you really start from quite humble beginnings, and then really build and build and build upon this layer upon layer and a layer, getting more detailed, more analyzed, assessing camera setups, character placement, number of characters and scene, minutia acting details through to big picture story briefs. You're trying to do this all before you've even actually started shooting any of the film, if you like.
Even those sort of story scenes, story beats of like how many people will be in the scene, or how I don't know, it's in like a writer's mind or director's mind, and they have this idea of like, well, we'll have a big swooping shot, for example, then you would do it, and then actually no, it doesn't work, so they can just completely scrap that and then really tighten up certain ideas and where the camera is going to be placed when it's being animated as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of it's a blessing and a curse in many ways. Like almost anything is possible. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of difficult in these earlier stages because anything can be possible. So you can almost try anything. So you have to be really disciplined and really focused and really try and dial it in as quickly as you can. I mean, obviously we're super lucky to have a really talented story crew on this. We have Rich Phelan heading the story team. He's a fantastic artist, fantastic story artist, and we got some great material to work with off the bat.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like if there's things that work and don't work, story beat wise as well, that's probably like a big thing as well. If you can, as you said, the possibilities are endless, but then also you will need to scale back because sometimes it won't be possible to do
Absolutely.
it. But you were talking about scratch dialogue and then temp music and temp tracks. But once you're sort of shooting the film itself and you're getting the footage in and you're building scenes around before actors have recorded their lines, how do you go about editing those scenes? Because I can imagine that there's always going to be a certain cut of how one of your crew members might sound, but then once you get the actors in who will be adding their own take on the character, does that affect how you guys cut scenes, or is it a case that you always know how it's going to sound, but you always know how it's going to play out, but it might just be minute details that you might need to change?
The edit is always evolving. So obviously when we're cutting the first pass with the scratch dialogue, I mean, sometimes you're super lucky, you have some great performers in the studio, but sometimes obviously you're working with amateur performers. You cut to rhythms in dialogue, I suppose. You do, yes, of course, but also the borders. Hopefully, by this stage, putting quite a lot of acting and performance into the posing and the characters in the drawings that they're giving us, and with the use of sound design and everything else, you can start really building a sense of the timing of a scene. You can get pretty well detailed. Obviously, when we record, the actors they're going to bring something else to it. They're going to the scenes really do come to life, and you can start really getting into detail. So yes, the cut is always evolving, always changing. I mean, even to the stage when we're turning over to our animators, the animators will bring something to it. They'll bring their take on how this acting could be delivered to this line. So we may have left a certain amount of time to perform in the gaps in between the dialogue, and then that will grow with the animators, and the voice performance will change how a scene feels. So yeah, the cut is constantly evolving.
And I can imagine that how different it must be with actors coming in and saying lines, and then because certain actors are in the film, and then we're so used to probably hearing their voice in other films that when it comes to editing, do you ever sometimes think about, they might be saying it this way before you get their lines in?
No, I don't think I've never experienced anything like that. I think we've spent so much time with the material. We have an idea of how it's going to be conveyed, and we'll be looking for that take from the actor and the director, and we'll be guiding that a certain performance out of the actor. But I think we know what we're looking for. Even if we haven't quite got it with our scratch dialogue, hopefully we'll be a million miles away from where we're going to end up with the final recorded voices.
Yeah, and I guess it always build and build whilst shooting, and things will slightly change, and working around to what you might have thought would be happening to what actually has happened as well. Because sometimes certain things will never go to plan whilst shooting. But also with the film, it has like a really good balance of comedy, heartfelt moments, and then there's a fun break-in / heist moments. When it comes to editing these scenes, how do you go about letting them flow one after the other so that it doesn't take the audience out of the moment, that it's sort of jumping between tones and themes?
Before we answer that question, can I just something you just said just now, introing this, it made me think about what we are talking about before as well.
No problem.
With the animatic stage, you really are trying to carve out a really detailed blueprint of the movie, going to inform not just the voice actors when they come to record their voices. It's also can help inform the animators when they come to animate their scenes. But also we have a whole team of creatives making puppets, making sets, scheduling the film, everything. All they need to know as much information as possible ahead of even booking the size of the location you need to build all these units in these sets. We need to know the kind of restrictions and restrictions is the wrong word, the expanse and limitations of what we can and can't do with a puppet that's so big, and therefore dictates that if we're going to take these characters, say, to the big city, we literally can't build a city set at the scale, a huge scale. So you need to kind of be mindful of that. You need to be mindful of the fact that you're working with the limitations of a miniature world we're creating, and also with puppets. We sometimes some of the hardest stuff to do in an animation is the slow, the intimate moments, the close-ups, the reactions to conversations, the reactions, deep, powerful moments, reading minutiae detail in eyes of a character. And these characters, their heads are the size of a golf ball, and we got to try and work out how to convey that emotion whilst only being able to move like a minute amount.
I know what you mean, because there's so much. If I look at you and you look at me, we can express ourselves in our faces. I think you can tell that in acting, when you're looking at people's eyes or people's shock, or sometimes if you're watching like a spy show, a slow burn spy show where you have the reaction shots of people where they hear news that they already know of, so you see that they kind of are slightly reacting, but they're trying not to show that they're reacting with like their poker faces.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess with something like this, it's so much more. It's infinitely harder because it's as he said, you've got something that's the size of a golf ball, which really isn't that big if you have a golf ball in your hands. If anyone in the audience has ever had one in their hand. So then to have that and then mold expressions onto it, that's just like a whole nother level of craft that people are able to do. So that when it comes to the edit as well, where you're saying you get 6 seconds of footage, it's like then building up from there to convey emotion of the scene, or convey what the line of dialogue they're trying to say. I think the big thing is, as well, as when you see I'll need to have a look, because I think I might get this wrong. It's like a monobrow that they sort of have, the chickens. I don't know if it's necessarily a monobrow, but it's like where
It's
human.
like it is like a capped brow almost. Yeah, it's almost like a single piece.
Yeah, it's like it's really hard to sort of say, because it's not necessarily eyebrows, but it's just like yeah, as you said, like a little cap area where they'll be like moving it up and down. I'm moving my hand for the audiences. I'm moving my hand up above my head, because I've realized this is just audio only, but it has that sort of conveying that, and then also that there's so much of that needs to be captured at the same time. And I think it goes back to your point as well, just how important it is doing that first sort of pass and building up before you actually start shooting, because you have to hit those emotional beats, those moments, and making sure that you're prepared for when you step onto the miniature set, shall we say. So that's also a really big thing. And I think, like, I guess the biggest takeaway is just how much prep needs to go into it, rather than the actual shoot, where all the hard work is there done before you even step on set and really nail what you guys want to go for. But I think as well, sort of going back to part of the film, because there is a balance of comedy and heartfelt moments, and it was also there's a fun break-in / heights moments. As an editor, like, how do you go about editing these scenes so that they flow one after the other and not take the audience out of the film?
It's an interesting question, because add on top of that, we have a cast of characters that people know and love from the first film, from the original Chicken Run, and we have two new characters bring into this film who are really kind of like the key characters in this movie, and we have to wrap this all up, if you like, in an action break-in heist movie. So it was a real challenge, trying to find out how much time to spend with the characters in their idyllic island paradise at the beginning of the movie. We've got to set up this paradise that they live in, and the stakes that they've set up for themselves. Ginger has spent, I don't know, we say Molly's now, I think she's 6 or 7 years old. She spent the last 7 years of bringing Molly up in this island paradise, kind of locked away from the world, protected from everything. And it's we've got to invest in that world. We've got to reintroduce. That's not the right word. We've got to remind everyone of the characters that you love, of the rest of the gang, or I was going to say reintroduce, maybe even introduce them to some people for the first time. Hopefully new people will be watching this movie, and set the whole story up, and then have the payoff of getting Molly off the island and on the adventure, so that the story can start. So there was a real balance to be found on the movie kind of really starts with her escaping this idyllic home that she's grown up in a search for freedom and adventure. She wants to go out and explore and find the world for herself, not be restricted by her mother. So that's where our story starts, but we can't really start it there. We're shortchanging all these wonderful cast of characters that people know and love. So we had to split. There's a balance to be found there, and how long to get there, and how quickly to get them off and on the journey and on to the next adventure, if you like. And then along with that, you're like great comic characters. We've got Babs. We got kind of Fowler almost comes to the fore in this film as a great comic character. We've got Fine Temp for all their moments, and still propel the mission they're about to undertake.
I think you made a really good point as well, as like reintroducing everybody into the world, because compared to the first film, where it's quite polar opposite, rather than being cooped up in a chicken coop in a prison basically to now being into that utopia and having it as like a different kind of prison, just be like more hidden away, and then having that maternal instincts of Ginger not to let her kid leave the nest too soon. And there are those real moments of just like when you're watching the films, you'll see the mother and daughter relationship and how I don't know, just how it hits as well with having certain of those moments play out. Then also, as you said, reintroducing those comedic elements of the cast.
It's the stakes, isn't it? You got to set up the stakes. You got to have something that a reason for Ginger's desire to raise her new family in isolation, and all, it's kind of like every family probably goes through the same dynamic, is the protecting your child whilst knowing that at some point they're gonna be let loose on the world, and you're gonna just have, you can't shelter them from everything. It's almost like the things that you're not allowed are always way more enticing and exciting than the things that are kind of right in front of you. No matter how hard as a family you try and work to make this perfect world for them, there's always something else on the other side of the water that's far more tempting.
Yeah, and as well, like needing to let your child sort of fly and get, and let them explore the world as well, even though it's probably one of those things where there's a lot that goes on. I'm not a parent yet, without so I don't. It's slightly different, but I guess with when you have those older audiences who watch the first Chicken Run, going from that sort of seeing Ginger as that sort of daring, no fear person to then turning into someone a little bit older, wiser, and more mature, should we say, in terms of what they want to do and how they need to think about their family rather than themselves and the situation they're in.
You talking about that then made me think of it. It's almost like it's probably a terrible analogy in this day and age, but it's people who used to, say, for instance, smoke. Probably try and think of a better analogy, but their kids see their parents doing that, and I'm going to think of something else. Let's not go down this. Let's go down this route. Whatever ideal world you create, you can almost guarantee you'll want to explore for yourself. You need to find the world for yourself, don't you? You need to go out and make your own mistakes and make your own adventures. And that's exactly it. The first film is all about is Ginger being this strong, powerful female character, and yet here she is in this new beginning, kind of stopping her own child from having that, to be able to have that for herself, for all the right reasons. Obviously, you want to protect your family.
Yeah, exactly. And there's certain things that will play out, and I think you made the really good point, is go out and make your own mistakes and figure it all out. Then also at the same time, it's like when you have, when they're kind of like, when certain people think they know a lot better and don't listen, and then it's like, oh, I'm in deep trouble, I need help now. And that's sort of plays a part in the film as well. And I do like how it's changed from a prison break to a heist film to sort of get someone out rather than break out. And even the comedic element of, oh, how do we get in? And then they do a breakdown of security of what is in the prison, not in the prison, sorry, the factory, and how, I guess, like, because you know what type of film it is, the comedic elements of that, saying how to break in, really tickled me and it plays out really nicely as well.
It's something I was trying to talk about earlier, about the early stages of the edit, and trying to sculpt the story from your storyboards and from your scratch records. But a big part of that was we went on many avenues, many wonderful gags and wonderful story moments of how these guys could break into this compound, of how they would, the things they could get up to inside the compound, inside the factory, if you like. But it kind of, going back to your earlier questions, in essence, we kind of had to strip all that down and keep it super simple in order to not distract from the kind of key themes of the film. I mean, hopefully we still, I mean, the break-in scene was a lot of fun. Hopefully we still have those moments, but it was a real balance trying to find a way to stay with Molly and Frizzle in what they're experiencing in this, kind of funland, which is this wonderful kind of utopia for chickens that's been created within the farm, whilst also playing off the peril of everyone else trying to get to them, and what could they be going through, and also once that gang then gets split up. So how long do you stay with each of these different elements of different? How much time do you spend with each moment? It was a real balance. It was a real challenge trying to find the right balance there.
I guess that's like, as an editor as well, because knowing that you could spend maybe 30 seconds too long with one set of group without then wanting to move along to the next set of group. And as you said, like, it's such a fine balance, but I think also you need to make sure that you can be giving each sort of each team a moment to sort of shine and show the sort of danger they're in or what they're up to as well. And
absolutely, but obviously not shine too brightly that they're going to distract from key moments that we want you to stay focused on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes people could mistake it as like a filler thing rather than take away from like the story and moving on. But it's always the supporting cast as well, and the supporting characters that always make comedies and remind you of like the stakes as well, that it's not just mother and daughter, but it's also the team behind it as well who are helping out and sprinkle in those sort of moments of comedic relief as well.
Absolutely.
But there's also, this is a big spoiler alert, but there's a spoiler alert anyway before the episode starts. But we see the return of Mrs. Tweedy. Now, at a young age, I'd say Miss Tweedy was quite a scary lady. And I think in the first film, she's captured so well that I think we, as kids, if you were playing outside or to the park or whatever, there was always like a Mrs. Tweedy type person around. I don't know if you ever had that.
There's always that neighbour who's, if your football went in their garden, you definitely weren't going to go and risk knocking on that door to ask for it back, right?
Yeah, we had a person like that. They would all, I think at one point they sat outside with shears waiting for the ball to come so they could pop it. And it's quite traumatic, like as an 8-year-old, because it's like you're just having a bit of fun. You didn't realize that you're disturbing someone's peace, but oh well, it is what it is. We went through a lot of footballs, let's just put it that way. But during the film, we see a lot of snippets of her and Ginger's PTSD of what happened and what she experienced in the first film. How do you go about sprinkling these clues to the audience, but then also create a sense of like, oh my gosh, she actually is back, she survived, as she's walking down those steps?
Funny, you almost answered that in the question. I think part of it is that that was Ginger's world. She was a captive on a farm, and Tweedy was her captor. She was the epitome of everything that was that she is now trying to hide away from. So I think in some respects, I mean, we toyed with the idea of not even trying to market the film without having any Tweedy in it, or having the trailer without revealing Tweedy. So it was going to be a surprise, if you like, her reveal in the movie. But I think you kind of didn't need to, because she is Ginger's fear. She is the face of everything that is terrible with the human world, and everything that Ginger is hiding away from. So I think we were okay to reference her, to even sneak a little peek of her. Even the silhouette reveal in the flashback dream sequence, I mean, is pretty obviously Tweedy. We kind of toyed with disguising her voice a little bit, but again, it's a dream. It's a flashback to Ginger's nightmares. So I don't think we're giving away the fact that she is gonna come back later by sprinkling those bits in. It's just it is what is everything that Ginger is fearful for.
I guess as well, like as a reveal, it does have that slightly comedic element, because she'll be walking down the steps and she keeps walking, and you'll have that moment of like, it should be terrifying, but I think it's the idea of like, because she's still so far away, I guess it also creates that sort of illusion of like, is that really Mrs. Tweedy coming down? Is it not? Is it being played out slightly differently?
I mean, did you know? Did you feel like you knew it was going to be her?
So I think it was slightly spoiled for me with the person in front of me when they were on their phone posting pictures from the exhibition. And because it was so sort of like, they were so close, you could see like the pictures of the puppets, and Mrs. Tweedy was one of them. And I thought, no, they can't bring her back. And it kept playing on my mind. And then it happened. I was like, okay. And I kind of like, you would understand why that she's been brought back, because it's it's the nemesis. It's like
Exactly.
Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
we really did play on that kind of Bond villain reveal moment, and I can't remember. There may even have been a couple of more shots of coming down. I think we tried to see exactly what that breaking point might be and how long we could play that moment out for. But it was hopefully a good gag, a good moment.
I think when people see it, they will, and they will kind of laugh at that. And there's also that Bond reference, because the factory itself, you have obviously the chicken world in itself is very set like, and then when you go and look around what's behind the scenes, it does have that very big Bond feel. And it's the same with Dr. Fry. Reminds me of Boris from GoldenEye a little bit. Right. I don't know if that played an influence or not, but he has that sort of I'm invincible sort of feel of it, because of how smart he is and how he's acting in the film.
As wonderful as the character Fry is, I think we needed the Tweedy factor for sure.
Yeah, you've got the puppet, but who's the real puppet master here?
Yeah.
But then, just to hit with my penultimate question, and this is what I'm sort of also curious about, because you have experience of working in live action, and then you also have experience of working animation. But when it comes to editing, what's the biggest difference that you find with it all?
It's the ultimate blessing and curse. Maybe we talked about earlier. It's the fact that in animation you can pretty much create any story, any new line of dialogue, any new setup you need, anything you need. Almost, you kind of got a blank canvas. You say to a guy, you say to our story, like you can say to your storyboard artists, your head of story, your directors will have the conversation. Let's try something else entirely here, and it can be almost a blessing and a curse. So you can find yourself going down rabbit holes of an idea, and in live action you have as an editor, you have your footage, you have your material to work with, and I mean, you can possibly negotiate having a reshoot, but it's not. It's you'd be very lucky, and or perhaps you're lucky enough to be on location and on set with your director, so you might be viewing rushes and be able to ask for missing coverage or what have you. But 9 times out of 10, you're that ship sailed by the time you're in the edit and you're working with your footage. But in that, those restrictions bring with it a new set of muscles you have to use, or a new set of muscles, or whether kind of you have to find different ways to solve problems or shortcomings that you might have with your material, and that can have equally wonderful results on how you tackle your edit. That's the primary difference.
Yeah, and I guess with having something where you can have a complete blank canvas as well, it's probably exciting, daunting, and also challenging. I think when I hear you say that, my mind went straight to the Jurassic Park quote that that Jeff Goldblum says that, like, even though even though you have it, even though you can do it, you shouldn't do it, basically.
Right.
Because it's like you can have it, but it's like the Pandora box that's being opened from it, from the idea of like creating what you can create to what you can't create, and then what problems will come about from that as well.
Yeah, you can create wonderful things with the most basic set of tools, and sometimes that can be restrictions can be make you think in different ways and open different creative avenues for you that being able to just pluck things from thin air can be a real danger sometimes.
Yeah, and having that blank canvas, you kind of think, oh, okay, we can really do anything. Sorry, I know I said that was my penultimate question, but another one has popped into my mind because of something you mentioned before we started recording, and a VFX element. How does the VFX element play into animation? Does it work in the same way as that you're trying to rub out certain things like strings on a puppet, or does it play a different part in it altogether?
Whilst we're starting the shoot on the very first few shots, we're turning those over to VFX almost immediately, because every shot in stop motion animated film is a VFX shot. We have rigs to remove at the very least. We try our best to hide them, but often it's not possible. So we'll have rigs. On this film in particular, the scope of the film was so epic that we couldn't achieve everything with a single scale puppet and set ratio. So we had, I think we had 2 different scale puppets, a smaller scale chicken puppet that we'd use when we're using the human scale puppets to animate alongside those, so they're kind of half the size of the puppets we're using in most of the other shots. We have different scaled miniature set extensions. We'd have matte painted backgrounds. We have completely CG generated environments. We have CG generated animated characters and crowd extras. So every shot, even some of the most simple shots, sometimes can end up being a huge build in VFX and to a degree in edit. So everything has to be built in edit to be signed off and approved by the director before you move on to your next shot. So every VFX is a huge part of the job, and that's going on. We're turning over every shot to VFX as they're being completed, while still shooting the other 60% of the movie, while still maybe working on 20% of the movie in story still in the animatic stages, trying to get that finished. So we're kind of juggling all those balls in edit at the same time.
I still think that's crazy to think that you're still working on it if you're a certain percentage of the way through. But then also the way that it can be used, especially on a film like this, where it's very hard to think how VFX could be used, just because I know I keep going on about live action, but with live action, you can see an explosion or certain backgrounds or something shot in space, and you're saying like, oh, that's either done.
And it brings its own challenges as well, because you don't want the VFX to look too realistic, too artificial. You want them to still maintain an element of almost looking like they've been handcrafted. So to really work on how we run smoke cycles, how we run water cycles, how far can you simplify them in order so that they fit in with the rest of the handcrafted world and don't stand out as looking too realistic. So it just won't work, you know.
And even stuff like that, where like water, as you're saying as well, or how that might flow on a screen, or probably also because of like the chicken sanctuary where they're in a big sort of foresty areas, like how probably the leaves are blowing in the sort of direction that they're going in as well. It's like that sort of naturistic side of it as well.
I mean, wherever possible, we try and shoot as much as we can. Even some of the effects elements are shot on a green screen with props and real elements, and then composited by VFX. But yeah, like I say, if anything is fully CG generated, then we're trying to work out, you know, spending a lot of time look dev, making it feel as stop frame as possible.
Yeah, because as you said as well, you start making it too, if it's too VFX heavy, then it loses its charm a little bit of that. It's gone from a stop motion to just a purely computer generated effect.
Yeah, I mean, we even referenced like some of the water looks. We'd try and make them feel as if they looked like water that was shot in a studio in a tank, as opposed to a actual lake of water. You know, we try and keep it in this kind of artificial crafted reality.
That must be such a difficult balance as well, in terms of like probably going through it painstakingly to see like frame by frame that it looks right and that it doesn't look too overdone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just for my final question, what was your favorite scene to edit?
It would definitely have to be. We talked about it earlier. I mean, it kind of culminates with the Tweedy reveal, but even before that, we have the investor. We have he's arrived and introduced to the world that Fry's created, to this welcoming room. I don't know what you call it. It's kind of it's a control hub of the farm. But this you know, he's kind of in awe. It's like, wow, actually, this joke of a character that I thought was this nutty professor type character, it's actually pretty serious. This place looks pretty amazing. And then from that we go into the presentation, 2D animated presentation film that Fry's put together, and that's playing in the background whilst we have the culmination of all our characters that have been trying to find Molly all coming into one place. So we have the comedy of the presentation film playing alongside the dawning of the reality of Molly, of what's actually happening in this place, along with trying to get all our moving parts into the same place. I mean, that was a real jigsaw piece of a scene to put together, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think because you're with Dr. Fry, when you first see him, it's kind of this bumbling idiot that's sort of hiding behind a computer screen who dresses up as a big chicken. And you as audience members, you know that something's wrong, but you think at the same time, it's just like, what an odd man. This something, even though something's up, you still think, oh, like he's kind of a bit of a joke. But then as you start seeing, as you said, the reveal of it all, that's when you sort of notice it's like, okay, this person has to be taken seriously.
Absolutely. But he takes real pride in his work. I think he really is trying to create a utopia for these chickens, whereby they're going to obviously be turned into delicious chicken nuggets, but they're going to enjoy their time whilst they're there.
It's quite funny though. It's just like the idea of like chicken nuggets and how they want to take the fear out of the death of the chicken to make food tastier. It's all just very clever and very well established and written.
Yeah, it was a joy putting that scene together.
Steve, thank you so much for your time today. Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget is now streaming now on Netflix. Go check out Steve's work and enjoy the film and jump back into that world.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
No. It's the other way around. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. You take care and bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.